There we go, got that out of the way. I will be sort of welcoming and facilitating this event today. So I will be introducing myself and others who will be sort of participating in that in a moment. But in terms of the event and what we want to achieve from it and how it will operate, well, it's about learning how to sell your product or service and secure contracts and enter a procurement process and grow your social impact business. That's a sort of what it does on the tin statement, and how to make sure you're best positioned for that kind of activity and engagement. And the webinar will be split into 2 parts to achieve this. So the first section will be benefiting from a workshop, a set of slides being discussed by Beth Pilgrim from the wonderful social enterprise Supply Change. And then after we've benefited from listening to Beth's advice and experience, we'll then move into a Q&A panel discussion where we're very pleased to be joined by a couple of representatives from buyer organisations, Oxford Direct Services and Oxford University, and I'll let those colleagues introduce themselves in a moment as well. And there'll be an opportunity there for some good discussion, and you'll have an opportunity to participate in that, of course, and we'd really want to make sure that this is a discursive and energetic session, and Beth, I'm sure, will also be available, as will I, to answer any questions as well during that session. So we think overall the first part will take about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll move into the Q&A session. And then towards the end, we'll also be having a forward look to future opportunities where we'd hope you maybe be able to meet some buyers as we move into 2023 and further engage with the Escalate program. So let's move on to some introductions, if that's okay. My name's Paul. I'm the CEO of a local charity and social enterprise called Aspire Oxford. I'm also a director of the Oxfordshire Social Enterprise Partnership, OSEP-KIC, and Aspire is one of the Escalate program delivery hubs, and that's why we're helping to facilitate this kind of event, as well as being hugely enthusiastic personally about social procurement. And I'm joined today, very pleased to be joined today by Beth Pilgrim, who's the CEO of Supply Change. And Beth, can I invite you to just give a short intro to yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Beth. I'm CEO and co-founder of Supply Change. We're a social enterprise that connects other social enterprises to public and private sector buyers looking for goods and services. And I'm going to be taking you through a bit of a webinar today. Brilliant.
Thanks, Beth. Very much looking forward to it. And then, as I said, afterwards we'll have a bit of a panel Q&A discussion, and we'll be joined by Nikki Atkin from Oxford Direct Services. Nikki, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself? That's okay.
Yeah, not a problem. Great to see you all here. I'm Nikki Atkin. I work for Oxford Direct Services. I'm a corporate services director there. I'm also the senior leader on social value. I had a really good grounding in my last role with Amy. A lot of you will know Emily Davis, worked very closely with her. And so I've basically, part of the reason I was recruited at ODS was to kind of like bring that social value. The ethos of the business is doing good. We've got some quite aggressive targets in terms of spend with local SMEs, and I'm really looking forward to taking part in this.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Nikki. Really pleased that you can join us. And we're also pleased to welcome John Robbins from Oxford University. John, would you mind just saying hello?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm John Robbins. I'm the IT category purchasing manager, which is a bit of a mouthful, but I work in the Central University Purchasing Department, and I've been working with several colleagues as we try and embed some social value into our procurement. The structure of the university makes that a little bit difficult, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in the Q&A, but we are starting to get moving on this and make some strides there. So yeah, it'd be good to talk that through.
That's great. Thanks, John. I'm really pleased to have you on board. Wonderful. Well, it's also good to know who is in the room. So I'm really pleased with like I said, for you making the time to join us today. So I think rather than going around the room, because I think that might take up almost 2 hours, if you could, it'd be really helpful. You could just post in the chat, just your name, your organization, and ideally what you'd like to get out of the session. And then we'll be using if you want to sort of post reflections or possible questions you'd like to be considered as part of the Q&A session, please also start to post those in the chat as we move through the workshop and program. Thank you in advance. Okay. I should also note, because otherwise Rosie from OSEP and Grant, who's also from OSEP on this call, and the wonderful colleagues who are helping to deliver the Escalate program, they'll tell me off if I don't say this. It's a fully funded webinar brought to you by OSEP using European Regional Development Funds, the last drops of that funding, on behalf of the Oxfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. Wonderful. Okay. Unless there's any questions, I then suggest that we move to welcoming Beth to run through her workshop.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. I'm just going to share my screen and then we can get started. Right, hope everybody can see that okay. So, hi everyone, thank you very much for having me today. As I said in my introduction, I'm the co-founder of Supply Change, and our mission is to increase the number of social enterprises in public and private sector supply chains through removing barriers to social procurement for both buyers and suppliers. So today I'm going to take you through a little bit of a workshop on how to get procurement ready. We're going to start by talking about what is social procurement and what are different buyers across both public and private sectors' motivations for it, before discussing how to identify the right leads and potential customers for you, and some useful sales strategy techniques to approach buyers. And then we will cover some of the basics of actually getting contract ready. So what are the key documents required by buyers in different sectors in order for you to win a contract with them and to get onboarded onto their supply chain. And then we'll finish up with talking about the customer relationship journey, so how to actually win clients over at a pitch or a meeting, and then once you have secured that client, how to kind of best practice account management to continue that relationship and ensure it's a successful one. So before I start, I just wanted to tell you a bit more about us. We are a social enterprise ourselves, and we were founded in 2018. And myself and my co-founders have a vision that all goods and services should be procured with social or environmental value at their centre. We aim to remove barriers to social procurement through a range of different services, mostly aimed at buyers. We offer an opportunity analysis which shows buyers a quick route to increasing their impact by looking at their existing spend and identifying categories that would be suitable to switch to social impact suppliers. We also do bespoke supplier research for buyers who might be working on a particular tender or in a particular location and who want to engage with local suppliers. And we have the Supply Change platform, which is a directory of pre-vetted social enterprise suppliers that buyers can access and search for social impact suppliers by their location or what goods or service they offer. We also run tailored networking events, and I'll tell you a bit more about those later, which allows social impact suppliers from our network to engage with our clients and pitch their services face to face. And we deliver training to both buyers and social enterprises like today around social procurement strategy and how to embed it. And finally, we help to report on the impact that any social procurement activity creates as well. Since we started, we've redirected over £500,000 of spend towards social enterprises, tackling issues such as homelessness, climate change, and much more. We mostly work across the built environment, so construction companies, housing associations, local government, higher education, and some corporates. So a lot of the tips that I'll be giving today are based on my experience of selling into those types of sectors, but hopefully it will also be more broad as well, and you'll be able to take something from it even if your clients are not in those sectors. We have an amazing community of supply chain trusted suppliers who are social enterprises that are members of our platform, which is currently free to join. Being a member of Supply Chain gets you access to buyers. You can attend our networking events and our resources as well. So if you're interested in signing up, I can share more information about that at the end as well. But now let's get on to the main event. So what do we actually mean by social procurement, and why are buyers across both the public and private sector increasingly motivated to work with organisations who can help them drive it? So quite simply, social procurement is the purchase of goods and services with the intention of generating positive social and environmental impact with that purchase. So as an example, say a construction company is bidding to build a new motorway crossing, and the local authority who is tendering the contract is keen to address unemployment in the local area. Part of the contract requires the company to deliver signage, so they decide to engage a local signage company who reinvest their profits into giving employment opportunities and training to people with disabilities who often face barriers to the workplace. So that's an example of what social procurement is. The good news is that organisations across the economy are becoming increasingly motivated to use social procurement and spend with social enterprises, with charities and other purposeful organisations. And that's for a number of different reasons. And I think understanding these is crucial to identify which types of clients you should be targeting, and it improves your chances of success of actually winning a contract with them. So we're going to go through a few of those motivations now. So firstly, one of the biggest motivators for a buyer to engage with social enterprises is because of legislation that may require or incentivize them to do so. So in January 2021, the government published a public procurement policy note called 0620, also known in more simple terms as the social value model. And this requires all central government departments to explicitly evaluate against social value in their tenders and apply a minimum of 10% weighting to it. So that means when they're reviewing tenders, they are always thinking about what is the social value aspect of this response. And that's now a requirement, not just a nice to have. The model itself is broken down into a number of themes that the bid can be evaluated against, such as COVID-19 recovery, tackling economic inequality, climate change, and reducing inequality as well. The model itself applies to central government bodies. So, for example, central government departments or cabinet offices, but we are also seeing it being rolled out and adopted by local authorities too. And actually, in some cases, it is being taken even further by local authorities. So the Greater Manchester Authority, for example, they have a social value weighting of 20% applied to all tenders. So it's definitely something that is increasing. There was another procurement policy note published in the same year called 1120, and this one is particularly interesting for social enterprises because this allows contracting authorities in the public sector to actually reserve contracts that sit under a value of £122,000 for either SMEs, oh, my light's gone out in my room, for either SMEs or VCSEs. So this is a huge step towards a step forward for the VCSE sector because it allows you to bid for contracts without having to compete alongside larger commercial suppliers. And it means that the contract is already reserved for social enterprises or charities in advance of applying for it. Another commitment that the government has made is to spend £1 in every £3 with SMEs by 2022. They are not actually on target to meet this, and they've pushed the original deadline back by 2 years, but it's something to think about, and they will obviously be trying to ensure that they meet this target. So it will be something that they're considering. And these targets and legislation are not just a motivator for the public sector, but also the private sector, particularly private sector businesses who act as suppliers to them. So companies trying to win government tenders need to demonstrate how they will deliver social impact as part of the contract. And social enterprises are well positioned to help government suppliers to meet those social value requirements by being subcontractors in their supply chains. So the different types of private sector businesses that might supply into the government include telecoms, defence, IT, consultancy, facilities management, and construction, which I mentioned earlier. So it's definitely worth finding out if your target client is a government supplier. And if so, think about which of those social value model themes does your work fall under, and how can you help your clients to meet bid requirements by engaging with them. And if you can articulate that, that will be hugely in your favour. The second, as well as public sector legislation, private businesses are also answered to shareholder demands. ESG criteria, you may have heard of that buzzword, which measures a company's environmental, social and governance operations, has become an important consideration in the investment space. Impact investors now look at a company's ESG performance as well as their profits when choosing where to put their money. So again, by working with social enterprise suppliers, corporates can meet their ESG goals more effectively. And so again, there's a huge motivator for engaging with social impact businesses. So again, think clearly about where your business sits within the environmental and social value criteria, and make sure that you list this as one of your key benefits in any sales pitch. Another motivator is consumer demand. So many private sector businesses will be consumer facing, such as retail, for example, and therefore be motivated by their customers' demands and approval. In a recent survey of corporate sector leaders, they said that 60% of respondents said that answering customer demand for socially sourced products was a reason for them to engage in social enterprise procurement. So responsible sourcing creates a point of brand differentiation for consumer-facing brands, and it helps them to stand out against competitors. Also, another survey carried out by Barclays last year found that 59% of Brits aged 18 to 34 prefer to buy from brands that market how they're reducing their environmental impact. And this age group will actually pay more for a product sold from a social enterprise more than any other demographic. So when you're thinking about who you sell to, if they are consumer facing, don't just think about the organizations themselves, but also who their end customer is, and find ways that you can help your clients to connect with their customers will massively motivate them to engage with you. Another motivator is employee engagement. So as well as external stakeholders, large corporates will of course have employees that they need to engage and motivate. In that same survey, 80% of respondents said that engaging with social enterprises increased employee motivation, skills and talent acquisition. Staff retention and employee satisfaction is hugely important to organizations, so definitely don't underestimate the importance of selling this as well. And then finally, business innovation. I think this one is particularly important for social enterprises because another motivator for buyers is finding new innovations or ways to make doing business more efficient. And social enterprises are often innovative in their nature, often finding new ways to tackle problems, like Paint 360, who take waste paint and recycle it back into new paint. So if your service is in any way innovative or unique, or has a way that can improve an organization's business operations, this will be of huge interest, particularly also if it saves them money. Social enterprises, I think, often get misrepresented as more expensive, but in many cases, they can deliver additional value compared to commercial suppliers. So if there are any elements of your service that drive efficiency and lower costs, be sure to mention this. Cost savings are, of course, particularly a motivator for public sector clients who are often up against increasing budget cuts. So now that you understand the motivations behind different sectors for engaging with social procurement, and you know which ones you want to sell to, you now need to decide which companies you're going to start approaching and how. If you're a new business or selling to a new sector, then you'll need to identify what we call early adopters. So these are organizations who are willing to invest in your product at an early stage and can help provide you with the traction and case studies to convert more customers. So early adopters might be corporates who are looking for innovation and a competitive edge, and therefore they're open to trying new suppliers or perhaps willing to accept an early version of your product or service. In order for an early adopter to come on board, you need to think about 3 key factors. The first is their pain or the opportunity. So what pain or what problem does the customer have? Are they aware of it? Does it cost them money? Who in the organization is aware of this? And how much data can you gather about the problem in order to think about solving it? And then secondly, do they have energy? When we say energy, we mean, for example, do they have budget allocated to this problem or this particular area? Are people invested in solving this problem or working on it? Has the person you're selling to got influence within the organization? And does the organization overall have a track record of early adoption, and therefore the kinds of people who might go for your product? Or are they also looking for a competitive advantage? And then finally, trust. So in order for them to be an early adopter, you need to build trust by coming across as a sector expert. So you need to show that you can listen, ask them questions, but also show success of other customers to show value. So just to summarize that, an early adopter, therefore, is aware of their pain, has budget and people to solve it, can demonstrate the energy to move quickly, and are willing to put their trust in you as maybe an unproven or new company. So once you've decided who your early adopters are, you now need to decide where to focus your efforts. And it can sometimes be helpful to break down clients into groups based on the level of effort that you need to bring them on board. It's helpful to segment your potential clients by their company profile, by what sector they're in, and also maybe even their geography, so that you're using your resource effectively, but also can create a very personalized sales approach, and that will maximize your chance of success. At Supply Change, it sounds a bit strange, but we use what we call the rabbit, deer, elephant analogy to determine where to focus our efforts. So I'll just talk you through what we mean by that now. So rabbits are often your early adopters. They might be a smaller company who has shorter sales cycles, their procurement processes aren't as long, and they might not be kind of the biggest brand on the block, but they will help you to get very quick wins under your belt. It won't take you as long to convert them or to get that purchase order from them. They won't have as many processes, but it will give you a case study, it will give you brand recognition, and then therefore help you to develop your value to other customers further up the supply chain. A deer is quite similar. They might have slightly longer sales cycles than, say, your rabbits, and they might not always be up for kind of being an early adopter, but sometimes they are. But they have a higher revenue potential than your rabbits, so they have more to spend. And but the downside is it may take you more man hours to convert them as a client. I think there's some noise on the call, so if you could just make sure you're on mute, that'd be great. So those are your deers, and then finally you have your elephants. So these are your big, really significant clients that could be potential game changers for your business. If you win one of these, then you're really kind of set. But this might be, for example, a big government department or a very large construction company. But the problem is with these ones is that they can take a long time to convert. There's a lot more paperwork or bureaucracy to get through. And so the sales cycle is longer. So if you are a new company or just new to the sector, or a small company with limited resource, then we would always recommend primarily focusing on your rabbits and deers first to get those case studies and to get that revenue under your belt before thinking about how to approach your elephants and get that potential game changer for your business. Once you've decided on those different segments and the rabbits and the deers that you're going to focus your efforts on, you can then further divide them into your warm, lukewarm and cold leads. If you're a new business or new to the sector you're selling to, it's always wise to focus on warm and lukewarm leads. And by that, I mean people who aren't completely new to you and you have some connection to. So start to think about your current networks. Are there people that you already know at the organizations that you want to approach, or can they introduce you to the right person? Or do you have existing clients within the sector that would be happy to provide a referral for you? Think about who the best person in the organization is to approach when you're making that initial contact. And this will, of course, vary depending on what you offer. But some job titles that often are kind of relevant to social impact suppliers are people who might have social value in their title, or CSR, or you also might want to directly approach people working in operations and procurement. It can be helpful to run a bit of a LinkedIn search of the company you're targeting and just to find their employees and find potential leads, as these are the ones that you should be making a really highly personalized approach to. Your lukewarm leads might be companies where you don't have a direct contact already, but you know that they are similar to ones where you do have a warm lead. So they might be competitors, for example, and therefore you want to work with them too. So think about building up what we call heat maps around existing customers to help map out who else you might approach. So, for example, if your existing customer is in a membership body or has an accreditation, maybe look at other organizations that also are part of that membership, because they're likely to be aligned. Again, here with lukewarm leads, you should try and make the approach as personal as possible. What I find is a good trick is if I've seen someone speak at an event or something, I will often follow up and say, oh, I thought your speech at that event was really great, just to make it a bit more personal and engaging. And then finally, cold approaches are where you have no prior connections and you require more of an iterative approach. And these are where you might not get as much traction. This is much more of a numbers game, and you might need to send out a high volume of emails to get responses. So whilst you can't be personal in your approach, just do think about how your email might catch their eye. Keep the content short but to the point. So things like, do you want to book a demo, or here's a link to my calendar to book a call. And maybe send across information on a one-pager rather than a kind of long email for them to read through. A useful tool that we use for cold leads is called hunter.io. This is a Chrome extension you can add to your browser, and that allows you to browse visit a client's website, and it will suggest the email format of people who work there and provide you with their email address. It is all completely GDPR compliant, even though it doesn't sound it, but that's a really good tool for kind of email mining as well. I'm going to move on because I know we have questions in the panel discussion and I'm conscious of time. So yeah, do keep thinking about any questions that have come up for you so far and add them in the chat, but I will power through because there's lots of content to get through. So you've now identified your clients, you've thought about who you're going to approach, you're thinking about the personalized approach that you want. But how do you also find out about live opportunities other than just kind of making profiles of the companies that you want to approach? Well, one of the other great ways to meet buyers and find out about opportunities is attending Meet the Buyer events. This is a great way of engaging early with buyers face to face and telling your story. It's also an opportunity for buyers to learn about your services and products. We have a ton of these that we run throughout the year, and if you sign up to our mailing list, you will find out about when these happen. In March 29th and 30th next year, we are running the Social Procurement Festival, which is our flagship event. It's a 2-day online event, all themed around social procurement, and there will be social enterprise networking on the agenda. So you can register your interest on our website now, and then you'll get notified when tickets are on sale for that. But that's a great opportunity to meet the buyers. If you are approaching the public sector, a great place to find actual live opportunities is Contracts Finder, which is the government's single online portal on which all contracts valued above 10k in central government and above 25k for local authorities are listed. It's free to use to find opportunities. You don't have to register, but if you do set up an account, then you can get emails with new opportunities that suit your organisation emailed to you regularly. Contract notices on Contracts Finder contain all the information about the opportunities that are being advertised, including who the buyer is, what they're looking for, any selection criteria, and the scope of the contract. And also whether the buyer has identified whether it's suitable for VCSEs or SMEs. We recommend filtering the search function on Contracts Finder by selecting the suitable for VCSEs tag, because then all those contracts will come up for you. But you're not restricted to just look at opportunities tagged in this way. And also you can register for our dynamic purchasing system. We launched this last year in partnership with Orbit. It's an end-to-end procurement portal specifically for charities or social enterprises. And it allows buyers to look for suppliers across different lots of goods and services, and the suppliers on there are always charities or social enterprises, so there are no commercial suppliers on there for you to compete against. You can join anytime and apply to be on the DPS, and when buyers publish tenders on there that are suitable to your goods and services, you will get notified. And also don't hesitate to get support from intermediaries. This can be quite a daunting topic, so you don't need to do it on your own. And there is a lot of support out there across the sector, not just us, but there are a range of organisations offering support, like School for Social Entrepreneurs, who run courses and workshops on further perfecting your sales techniques and finding new clients. When you do find a contract that you want to apply to, there's quite a bit of paperwork that you might often need to get in place as a business to make sure that you're ready to take on the contract. For public sector contracts, you normally have to fill in what's called a standard selection questionnaire. This contains key questions about your organisation, but also more detailed questions specific to that particular contract. And you can find the template of this questionnaire, which I've hyperlinked here, and I'll share the slides after this event. For both public and private sector organisations, there are key documents and information that you should have to hand. So consider checking things like what insurances you need as a business to engage with this client. Some common ones that are required by most businesses are public liability if you engage with the public, professional indemnity if you're offering consultancy services, and employer's liability if you employ people. Make sure that you also have policies in place as an organisation. Some key ones are often a modern slavery policy, a diversity and inclusion policy, a data protection policy. You can find templates for these online, and make sure that within those policies you have someone that's responsible for carrying them out in your organisation and tracking and monitoring on progress. Also make sure you do have a reference or a case study of previous work that you can present to the client. And if you have, and make sure you have any required certifications as well. So these will vary depending on what services you offer. For example, if you work with young people, you often need to provide a DBS certificate. Or for example, if you are working in food, you might have to provide a food hygiene certificate. So you read up on those, what those requirements are, and make sure you have those in place. And also a lot of buyers will often ask for copies of your accounts. Some buyers ask for at least 3 years, which obviously is not always possible if you are a new business. So see if you can speak to the buyer about what alternative information they can accept if you aren't able to provide that amount of accounts. But finally, before you do apply for a contract or a tender, do make sure that it is the right one for you. It can sometimes take a really long time to apply to these things, or to implement the things that you need in place in order to apply for it. So when you are going for these contracts, make sure that you've read the criteria, that you meet it all, to look at the questions and think about how you're going to ask them, because the worst thing is kind of putting all that time and effort in and then realizing that actually you weren't eligible for it in the first place. If you don't apply for a contract kind of via a contracts finder or an official tendering system, but you have a client meeting, there's a few things to think about in order to make sure that your initial meeting goes really well and that you wow them. So firstly, do your research. We do something called a prospect fact sheet before we have client meetings, where we research the client's website, any recent articles, just to find out as much as we can about them before the meeting and anything that we can bring up in it. Also a good idea to read any strategic documents they have on their website, especially anything around their social or sustainability strategies, so that you can align with them. And then that will help you to go into the meeting feeling prepared. Different organizations have different impact measurement systems, like the UN Sustainable Goals or the TOMS framework, which is quite popular with the public sector. So try and find out which they use and use the buzzwords that they engage with as well. In the meeting itself, it's great if you can get at least 2 to 3 people attend and key decision makers, especially with large organizations. You want to make sure you're not reliant on kind of one stakeholder who might not have the right amount of influence to get your contract over the line. So if possible, try and get someone at director level, as these are often the budget holders. Make sure you have a sales deck that you can talk through, which has key information on, but leave most of the talking in detail to you. Don't distract them by too many slides. 10 slides is usually a good measure. And maybe put in some punchy statistics around the problem or your solution or the effectiveness of your solution, because often clients really respond well to numbers. And again, pick up on any key buzzwords that they use through their own comms and use these. And make sure you ask them questions as well. So do these at the beginning of the meeting, because then you can scope out any specific needs or problems that they're dealing with, or any prior experience with your type of service as well. And also find out the person that you're meeting with, what their personal targets are and what their job role entails, because then you can help them to meet them and they'll be personally motivated to engage with you as well. And then, as we discussed earlier, there's obviously a range of motivations behind why an organisation is interested in your services. So be sure to tell the story of your organisation and highlight your impact. Clients often respond to impact in quantifiable terms. So things like X amount of spend with our organisation could create X amount of jobs, for example. But including a case study or a really impactful success story can also be a great way to engage clients and also give them that kind of fear of missing out. So drop in any existing clients that you're working with too, to make them feel a bit jealous. And make sure that whatever you're asking for at the end of the pitch deck, so your pricing or the package that you want from this client is really clear. So there's no vagueness around this. And also always be closing. So even in at the end of the meeting, when you're wrapping up, don't let the client be kind of vague about when they'll come back to you. Try and get a really clear date in for a follow-up call, and make sure you have written down any kind of next steps and actions and follow that up as soon as you get off the call, because you don't want them to forget about you. And finally, no response doesn't mean no. And I say this from personal experience. Often both public and private sector clients can be very busy and they cannot respond to your emails because they have lots of other things to do in their jobs and they're overstretched. But if they haven't outright said no, then don't see that as a dead lead. Obviously, you have to limit your time and your resources, and you can't be always emailing someone that's not getting back to you. But we've had clients that have, converted after a year of me really working on them. So do think about just kind of keeping on their radar if they haven't said no to you. And then last, once you have hopefully secured your client, you'll want to make sure that you deliver a winning partnership to ensure a long-lasting relationship. So here are some tips for this. So as we've said earlier, definitely get your paperwork in place in advance of getting on board to their supply chain. So getting all those policies and documents required by the client so you can get set up on their procurement system straight away and make sure you get paid on time. We keep copies of insurances and policies for suppliers who are on the platform so that we can give those to clients really quickly and speed up that process. If you do have a kind of written contract with the client, make sure the deliverables in that contract are really clear and they are what you've agreed, and that you have a clear service level agreement with the client, because it can be very easy, particularly for small businesses, to over deliver and overstretch themselves for large clients. So you don't want to make sure that you're upfront at the start about what you're planning to deliver. And also lay out a plan for the partnership. So for the duration of time that you're working together, it might be good to set up monthly account meetings to keep stakeholders informed on the progress of the partnership and keep on track with milestones, and make sure you have someone in their comms teams at that meeting and have a bit of a comms plan for the partnership. Things like blogs together, press releases, social media content, because you want to have plenty of opportunity to promote the work that you're doing together, so that you can show it off to other clients. And buyers themselves are really motivated by good PR stories and brand and marketing opportunities. So the more content you can create that highlights them as a leader, the better. And also wow with impact measurement. So ensure you're collecting data on the impact that you're achieving with your client from day one, and report on this throughout the partnership, as this will keep them motivated to keep going, and also something to talk about externally. See if you can find out what their impact goals are and make sure that you align whatever impact data you're reporting to them. Make sure everyone knows who you are, so offer to run potential lunch and learns for the whole office, or make sure you can meet with as many people as possible, so you're not just reliant on one contact. And also get an internal champion, so someone who's really invested in your mission or your personal service. You might even want to consider kind of offering them opportunities to talk at events, to make them feel a bit special, so that they're really invested in your success as a supplier. And also, even when you've just won the contract, it's not too early to start thinking about the future already. So make sure you have a plan in place for when your contract is due for renewal, and start conversations about renewal as early as possible. So you don't want to wait right until the last minute to think about what you can offer in that next year of working together, and think about what you've learned from the first year so that you can improve it even further. So that was a quick run through of how to get social procurement ready. I hope you found the content of today's webinar useful. I've put my email address here. Would love for you to get in touch if you are interested in joining Supply Change to get access to buyers, networking events and resources. We've also have a blog, which I've linked here, which has some useful articles on it. And you might want to sign up to our newsletter as well to hear about our events and other activities. But I will share these slides with Paul afterwards as well. So I will stop sharing now and pass back to Paul.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Beth. That was jam-packed with useful information and tips there. So much appreciated. And yes, we will be able to share those slides after the event. So thank you for that kind offer as well. So empowered and informed with all that information and best practice helps to set up nicely for the Q&A discussion, and grateful that Beth can stay on the call for this, as well as welcoming Nikki and John to participate in this next section too, and of course all of your good selves. So if you want to, if there's particular questions you'd want to consider, can you start popping them in the chat? But to kick things off, I have naturally prepared a couple of myself, and we'll take it from there. So I guess the first question I had was looking at that important point that you made early on, Beth, was around buyer motivations. So I wanted to ask John and Nikki, with their buyer hats on, two questions. The first one is to ask, please, if you could share, well, what's your organization's motivations for getting involved with social procurement? And the second part to that is, do you have a particular portal of preference for expressing those opportunities? And lastly, what would successful social procurement look like in, say, 18 months from now, from your perspective? So maybe Nikki, could you start?
Wow, I'm not going to remember all three, Paul. Come on, give me some credit. But can I just firstly thank Beth for that presentation? It was excellent. You proper get us as buyers. You really nailed it there, so thank you. So what motivates ODS on social value procurement? We are actually a social enterprise ourselves. We provide services on behalf of Oxford City Council. We also have a different side of the business as well. We have a trading arm. So we will go out and bid for contracts as a commercial business and not be subject to kind of the social procurement rules. Part of ODS's mantra is like we get polo shirts and on the arm it says doing good, and that's what we do, and that has to filter through all parts of the business and the business plan. So procurement, my procurement and governance manager is a very good example of somebody like I was really punching above my weight to get her, but she wanted to join us because of that mantra and kind of providing services to the community that she lives in. And we also choose our suppliers very carefully. Where we can source locally, we will, and collaborate, with the local suppliers to kind of like see what else we can provide, on top of the contract between us both, that's going to benefit everyone. Remind me the second one, Paul.
Thanks. Yeah, the first part was around, well, what's your organization's motivations, and you've shared that, so thank you. There was a question around, is there a particular portal or way of engaging of preference that you tend to use? And then it was, well, what would successful social procurement look like to you in, say, 18 months from now?
Okay, thanks, Paul. Memory's not good on my point of view. So we, as I say, collaborate with Oxford City Council a lot with their procurement team. So for kind of thresholds, because we're subject to the public procurement regulations, we use their procurement portal, which is called it's just changing actually. It was Proactis, it's now called Intend. So for any suppliers, it's free and easy to register with them. But we are our scheme of delegation is geared towards, so anything sort of below that public procurement threshold, we will kind of like do pre-market engagement. So we'll look at what's out there locally, kind of like unsolicitedly call you, tell you we've got this opportunity, would you be interested in applying for it? And we've just recently done that on a flooring contract actually, and it's been quite successful. So yeah, that's how we do that. And in 18 months time, I'm hoping I'm hitting my target of kind of like our total spend will be with 70% of local SMEs.
That's great. It's great to know that you've got that ambition around how you want to use your spend locally. So that's a good call to action. Thanks, Nikki. Appreciate it. John, do you mind if we turn to you? Do you want to share a bit of the sort of background around the motivations of Oxford University to get involved in social procurement, and any portal of preference, and what would success look like in 18 months from now?
Yeah, sure. And excuse me, I'll start off by saying thank you, Beth, because that was a great presentation and I've taken notes. So that's really good. And also to everybody else, the point you made about if you don't hear anything, that doesn't mean no. I'm one of those people, because Beth has contacted me and I haven't got back to her, but I definitely haven't forgotten about it. So back to the question, motivation for the University of Oxford. If you're from Oxford or from around Oxford, you know that the university has a big impact on the city. We're all over the place across the city. We bring in a lot of money into the university. Do we spend that money locally? No, we don't. A lot of it gets passed on to much bigger suppliers and international suppliers, and we don't necessarily make use of what we've got around us, and we don't contribute back. That's a feeling that we want to do more of that. We do lots of different things. There's lots of engagement with the public that the university does, but it'd be really good to do something meaningful at a local economy level, and we don't do enough of it. So that's the motivation. I've bored lots of people on this call before with our organisational structure, but for anybody who doesn't know, we're kind of a devolved structure, which makes it difficult for someone to actually put in a policy from above unless there's a real driver. So for us, it's been a struggle with social value to actually find out where we want to tackle and how we go about doing that. So we're kind of working on things at the moment, and we're looking at different ways of doing that. And we've got to do it carefully, because leading on to your next question about the which portal, like Nikki, we use Intend. Spend thresholds are slightly different. So we don't run a tender under 25k. That is subject to other purchasing regulations where you've got to get 2 comparative quotes. And as I said, we've devolved, so every department can do that, and they'll run their own purchasing activity. So intenders are over 25k, but you can register, and if you feel that's where you want to be, then there's lots of different, there's a whole variety of categories that you can have a look on there for any open tenders. What would I like to see in 18 months' time for social value? I personally, and it's something that me and my department want to kind of push out, and with other colleagues in the university, I'd like to see a pool of local social value suppliers that the university has vetted, put in place, almost given an accreditation of, you're an Oxford social value supplier, you're trusted. And I'd like to open that up to the university, to all those departments who can purchase independently, and say, here, if you want to spend and have a social impact in Oxford, here's a whole bunch of suppliers, here's a pool of suppliers that you can use, that are trusted, that have gone through all the due diligence that my department wants to do, which touches back on all those things that Beth was talking about. And please go and use them, and let's report back. But this might lead on to other questions. The reporting back from the suppliers on that whole social impact will be really important for us. And from my point of view, I really don't want to sink any suppliers with the university, because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of money comes in, and if we've got over 100 and something departments, and if they all start using a very small supplier, you can quickly swamp supplier. So I think in 18 months' time, great to have that whole pool of suppliers, but we want to go carefully and make sure that we do it, and the suppliers are protected as well at the same time. So massive, wide-ranging response there. I hope you can pick something out of that.
That's really helpful, John. Thank you. And it's nice to hear that empowering ambition that you have to sort of encourage and enable the wider network of colleges within the wider institution of the university there to make more of social value procurement. So thank you. I'm quite inspired by that answer, to be fair. In the meantime, we've had some helpful questions posed through the chat, so I just wanted to pick up on some of those. So Yaz, thank you. You said, do local councils or local government have a target or criteria for BAME run businesses? Maybe I could pose that to Nikki to start off with, given your local government background.
Yeah, personally we don't, and it's something we probably need to address in the strategy going forward. So yeah, I totally welcome that being brought up. Okay,
well, thank you. Very honest. Beth, I don't know. I mean, you've engaged with a few local authorities. Has this come up before in your engagements?
It hasn't, but I do know that in the wake of the death of George Floyd in 2020, there was some recommendations made to both private and public sector firms about minimum spends with ethnic minority businesses. So an organisation called MSD UK has urged all kind of FTSE 100 firms, so sort of large corporates, to commit a minimum of 1% of procurement spend with ethnic minority businesses. So that's the kind of public sector advice, but I think that you could apply it to the public sector too. The public sector often use the term supplier diversity and needing to increase that. So I think it's definitely worth highlighting, if you are an ethnic minority led business, highlighting that you can help for them to improve their supplier diversity as well.
Yeah, that's a good one to share. As it happened, I was at Blenheim Palace yesterday evening, as you do, who are a big buyer in Oxfordshire, and their managing director, he said that a motivation for them is wanting innovation to improve the business, to get new perspectives and diversity of thought, as well as diversity of suppliers. And that's why they're actively seeking out social enterprises. So I think appreciate there's not quite the same question, but there's an alignment of perspectives there about why social enterprises can be really valuable for buyers. Next question was from Catherine, and this is maybe one, Beth, that you might be able to give some advice on. This is how often do you chase or pursue a buyer when you think the contract is yours and then the buyer goes quiet? How do you make sure you're not too pushy but you get an outcome?
Yes, I was reading this question. It's a really tricky one, and you kind of have to go with what you think is sensible for your business and your time. It sounded like from your question that you were quite far along and they approached you about working together. So I'd say that they are an engaged buyer. It might just be that they've gone quiet because of the time of year. But I think don't be afraid in your kind of follow-ups to sort of be quite frank and say, why have you gone, why have you disappeared, and what is it that has changed, in order to get a response. I personally, as John knows, always email people, and I think, unless they've said, no, please stop contacting, it's worth just checking in, maybe not every week, but every month or so. But I think feel free to be direct with them and ask kind of what's the reason for the hold up, because you obviously don't have unlimited time to spend on them.
Yeah, from a buyer's perspective, I'd say definitely do email through. It depends how far you are down sort of contracting. Cold calls will definitely be pushed to the bottom of the pile unless there's something really interesting in there. But if you've engaged with the supplier as a buyer, I'd expect to see the correspondence coming through. And probably a good thing to motivate people is say, can we get sort of 5 or 10 minutes in the diary to have a quick meeting? Just face-to-face to catch up on where we are, because it'll sort of, if you put something in the diary, then things usually happen. But I always ask people to nudge me along, because you can be busy as a buyer. There's lots of different things coming in, and so something to put it to the top of your pile again just does help. And it's part of business. You need that communication.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just to come in on the back of that, if that's okay, Paul.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, we're a relatively small organisation. We've got about 650 employees. My procurement team doesn't have access to a legal team. So it's down to us to put the contracts together, and that may take some time. So yeah, absolutely, just keep badgering us.
And don't forget, there's been Brexit, a pandemic, and then someone decided to invade Ukraine. And so it's made purchasing quite a sort of busy area at the moment. So there's lots of different things going on.
My takeaway phrase there was keep badgering. I'm going to write that down. Thank you. Politely. Moving on then, Grant, you want to pose a question to Beth, I think, about a shift from the Social Value Act driving public spend towards more general private sector engagement. Permission to expand, if you will.
Yeah, great, thanks. And John, I would just say that sounded like a cabinet minister response, that, mate. Anyway, but true. Actually, it's an interesting point, because I mentioned it in the chat, but there's a lot going on around social value through procurement under the Inclusive Economy Partnership, which some of you are involved in. And so one of John's colleagues did actually make the point that in pushing all of this stuff through, we do genuinely have to be realistic about the challenges within procurement generally. So I think, and I know Lindsay's on the call, who's a procurement professional, and she knows all about that, and she's helping organisations with those challenges. So I think that's something we do need to bear in mind while still being as pushy as we are. But to go to my question, yeah, Beth, when I first came across the Social Value Act, I was actually working in the voluntary sector, having come out of the corporate world, and got really excited about it. And then as the years went on, got very frustrated. It wasn't having the traction that it should have had, and we're getting there now. And I touched on it just now. The work that we're doing under the Inclusive Economy Partnership is very much about local authorities. So the city council, the county council are really keen to embrace this and do something with it. But we've got 45,000 businesses in Oxfordshire. And my message to them is, if you've not been asked about this yet, you soon will be, because it will come down the supply chain. You did touch on this. I know you talked about people's motivations and why businesses are trying to be more responsible. But, it frustrates me a little bit that we depend upon the Social Value Act and that regulation to make things happen. And it has eventually. We're getting there. But I'm just wondering what shift you're seeing just from general private sector businesses wanting to do more. And I know, Nikki, you talked to, your time at Amy, you must have been there when they signed up to the By Social Corporate Challenge, the social enterprise thing. And I know that that's been difficult for organizations to buy down the supply chain. But yeah, sorry, I'll try and keep it concise. That question is about, general, forget the Social Value Act, how many people just want to have impact through their procurement in the private sector?
It's a good question. I think, it's always hard to tell what a buyer's true motivation is. And, at the end of the day, they are businesses themselves. They have budgets, they have targets. So, of course, things like being able to win contracts or being able to retain staff or being able to retain consumers is going to be front of mind. But I would say that I'm really encouraged by when we do engage with clients that yes, they're doing it for commercial reasons, but also just because it is the right thing to do. And I think I've seen an increase in that in the last couple of years because of the external world that we're living in now. I think particularly the pandemic drove organizations to see that they can't just go back to business as usual, and they have to demonstrate what they're doing as a large organization with a large footprint in the world to continue to be a social and environmentally friendly organization. And I think that's been motivated by a larger sort of societal shift towards kind of what can we all do to ensure that we're moving in the right direction. And I think particularly now with the cost of living crisis, obviously businesses themselves are impacted by that. But one of the ways that they can continue to sort of demonstrate that they still care about social and environmental issues is through their procurement spend and spending that with organizations who are probably helping people that are disproportionately affected by the cost of living crisis. So, obviously budgets come into that, but I think most clients that we're speaking to, that motivation hasn't gone away as a result of kind of the crisis that we're facing. If anything, it's strengthened. But obviously logistical things like budgets and stuff are becoming more of a difficulty. So I think it's a combination of the two. Obviously, the social value model has a huge motivator, particularly for strategic suppliers to government. But for those that are not, Amy, for example, was already leading the way on social enterprise procurement before the social value model. So I think I'm encouraged by the fact that buyers see social procurement as the way forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Yeah, to send there's increasing goodwill, but just hoping that there's the capacity to match that goodwill for procuring departments, which John referenced in his earlier answer. John and Nikki, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to Beth's response there. Otherwise, there's plenty more questions to go through.
I would say that it's going to be tough in terms of people's budgets. But if you're working in procurement, you're seeing a lot of money go through, and I think everybody who works in procurement, you've got a mind on making those savings, and getting those additional benefits. But really, you want to make an impact. You want to do some good in what you do, and I think you'll find a lot of people in procurement want to do that because they've got the power to do it. So I think you'll definitely see it grow. And with the challenges we're seeing everywhere, why not sort of spend that money locally, support people who are basically, for the University of Oxford, that's our local clientele. That's the people we mix with day to day. So why not do that? And I'm sure other organisations, they want to draw from the local areas for recruitment. And so they want to support that.
Thanks.
Just to chip in very quickly, Paul, if I can, and I think that's the other thing as well, and I know university is a good example, is that you've got those tier one suppliers, but you've also got procurement asking more questions of their suppliers about what they're doing in terms of their policies as well. So, even if they're not dealing directly with an organisation that's delivering social value, they're asking questions of them to ask questions of the supply chain. And I think that's where we get the leverage and even more power, really.
Yeah, quite right. We can all be buyers too. As well, we have our own procurement power, even as smaller organisations, and a responsibility to use it well. So thank you. There's a good question then posed by Liz, which is, well, how do you as procurement teams, so John and Nikki with your colleagues, how do you find out about local organisations that can support you with your procurement needs? Is there a database? Noting the initiatives such as by Supply Change and Social Enterprise UK, and of course with OSEP, with the growing Escalate supported community of social enterprises. But where do you go to? Nikki, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. Do Yellow Pages still exist? I'm not sure. So being a local organisation, we can draw on our internal kind of knowledge. There's a lot of families that work at ODS that have interests in local SMEs and stuff like that. So it's internal communication of, we've got a pipeline that comes up, and we always put it across our workforce to see if they know anyone locally that might be interested, if it's right for them. I really bought into the OSEP thing that's coming up in terms of like that kind of database generation, because we will definitely use that. But yeah, I mean, being completely honest, which I genuinely am, we need to get better at it, and any help that or ideas that people can give us, we'll take on board. But it is our first motivation to kind of like tap into locals, and my team are quite ingenious on how they do that, and they work hard at it, and it means a lot to them. But yeah.
Thanks, Nikki. That's good to know that there's the absolute goodwill and intention there as well, if you can get some more improved access opportunities. John, does that relate to your experience?
Again, it's a little bit of a strange one for us. I've worked in the purchasing department at the University of Oxford for 3 years now, and I've never placed a purchase order. It's just the way that we're structured. We're a central kind of unit which puts agreements in place, puts suppliers there for all the departments, the developed departments, to use. So it's the departments that make those decisions, go out looking for the lower value purchases. When it gets to my department, we're looking at higher value purchases, more strategic. So we'll be looking and sounding the market at a much higher level, maybe. When we're looking at large print contracts to go across the university, we'll be looking and going and dealing with Ricoh and Xerox and all those kind of people. But so basically, when you're at a departmental level, I would imagine people are basically getting their business needs together, having a look and do some market sounding, basically using the internet a hell of a lot to do those searches. If they're wanting to buy social value, I think it will be coming up in those social value searches, but they'll also be leveraging things like OSEP and probably the contacts people have got there. But it's something, when I talked about in 18 months' time getting a pool of suppliers, that's something where that's how we can kind of push that out across the university. So people get to know about social value through basically something that we're really promoting. But a really important point that I want to make to all the suppliers as well is, and I shouldn't probably be saying this being in the central bit and wanting to consolidate spend, but you can go and contact any of the departments in the university and any of the colleges. And at that lower level spend, they can spend their budgets how they want to, with who they want to, if they follow the purchasing regulations. So there's nothing to stop any of the suppliers here from looking on the website at the University of Oxford, finding different departments and talking to them directly, and just seeing what they can do there, because I won't really see that expenditure being where I am, because it will be probably in that 1K to 25K kind of expenditure level. And anything over that, I might get involved and see it. But if you want to start engaging with the university, there's nothing to stop you.
Okay.
But Paul, it might be worth just mentioning as well that other dimension, which is the colleges, and certainly Aspire's got good experience of that, haven't they? It might be worth just mentioning that.
Yeah, I guess it's a similar extension to what John's just articulated there, that colleges have their own spend and their own decision-making powers, and of course, no doubt look to central institution for guidance and inspiration. But yeah, it's definitely worth, if you have the time and opportunity, to build those relationships of trust with the colleges, who have, of course, significant procurement needs across the city. So yeah, absolutely, and that's something that Aspire's benefited from, and of course the colleges have benefited from that relationship with us. So yeah, very much so. Beth, I didn't know if you wanted to come in here, and I don't know if you've got examples from other parts of the country where you've been engaging with bigger buyers about how they've maybe sort of reached out or found new ways of engaging with new suppliers.
Sure. I think, well, as I said earlier in my talk, one of the main ways that a lot of corporate and private sector suppliers to government engage with suppliers is through meet the buyer events. Often these will be in-person events, and they'll be specific to a region, like a big city like Manchester or Leeds, and you can go along and attend, and there will be different organisations with stands who are there all day basically to speak to potential suppliers. These are quite common in the construction sector. I'm not sure if local government ever do them, but we have actually done a Meet the Buyer event for Barking and Dagenham Council in London. We did an online one. So I think depending on the council and the local authority, networking and early engagement events are really good, because that's the best way to find buyers before you've gone to market. And sometimes that can be a really good point to engage with them at. I think there are kind of local VCSE directories in different areas of the country, but the quality of the data on them really varies, and it depends on kind of who's maintaining that. And that's sort of the reason that we set up Supply Change, because we thought that there was a lack of a really clear, high quality social enterprise supplier directory, which had up-to-date data on really contract-ready suppliers across the UK. So yeah, we're hoping to kind of engage more with local authorities for them to use the directory as a way of putting their local suppliers onto it, so that they're all in one place. But I would say, yeah, meet the buyer events, local supplier directories are a really good way for buyers to find suppliers.
Brilliant, thank you, Beth. And as if on cue, Fiona Thomas, who's kindly joined us from Oxford City Council, has just confirmed about the Meet the Buyer event in the Town Hall on 28th of February 2023, and we're from speaking on behalf of OSEP, we're very keen to engage with Fee to make sure that that event is widely promoted and accessible, and a great platform for social enterprises and purposeful businesses to also engage with the diversity of buyers that I know that Fiona and her colleagues are keen to have represented there alongside the City Council. So thank you for that, Fee, very well timed. Just going back, Richard, you posed a good question, going back to portals and their finicky ways. So you said you registered with Intend at the behest of the City Council, and you found the categories very restrictive. So maybe Nikki or John, with your Intend background, I mean, how do you get over that sort of overly restricting how a company could describe what they could possibly the benefits they could bring to you?
Go on, John, you go first.
Well, I was going to say that for us that gets built up over time, and there's various different categories that things usually fit into, but it's kind of restrictive. Yeah, I'd agree. It is a little bit restrictive if you've got something niche. But if you've got something niche, then maybe Intend isn't the way in for you, and maybe you need to make some direct contact to find out where you can engage with the university, because Intend is there for us to put procurement on nicely in a category, opens up to a certain amount of suppliers that that we know we'll get a good response from, and we can start engaging at that level. If someone's coming along and doesn't find any of those categories suit what they do, then I think we need probably a bit more of a conversation to find out exactly how it fits in, and we can figure out where our business needs would be for that. Not a great response, but I don't think it's necessarily intended as a problem, but maybe just the way of communicating what your offering is.
Yeah, I mean, Richard, do you want to DM me in terms of categories, because we're still implementing Intend, so we've got access to their development team, so we can chat it through with them.
Thank you, Nikki. That's great. Yeah, thank you, John, too. I get it, and of course, you make the very good point that it's maybe not the only route, and as you previously mentioned. But thank you. I will do. Yeah.
Thanks. I think it'd be exciting if over, let's say, in 12 to 18 months from now, there are relationships that are formed between suppliers who have improved and upped their game and have done all the due diligence. And as you said, John, earlier, you're from a buyer's side, you're you're keen and willing to promote them to your fellow buyers, and then to have that relationship where equally suppliers can make suggestions about how to improve the process, the engagements, the portals, so that we can all get to that better place of a smoother, streamlined approach that really does embed social enterprise and purposeful business spend at that much more ambitious level that Nikki mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's got to be a two-way conversation on that, Paul, definitely, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to highlight, thank you to our colleague Rosie. She just put about an Eventbrite link as just to capture, if you are interested in the Meet the Buyer event that Fiona kindly mentioned. If you want to register your interest as a social enterprise to find out more about that, then that's a good way of capturing that interest, and we'll be sharing more information about that event as in the coming weeks. So thank you for that, Rosie. Brilliant. Well, I think we've come to the. I did have another question, but then it's been answered by the Meet the Buyer event discussion around how do you get access, that valuable face time to build trust. So I don't know, John, Nikki, or Beth, if you have any other clever ways beyond the Meet the Buyer events and the festival, Beth, that you mentioned as well. It sounds like a wonderful idea. I don't know if you wanted to share any more tips or ways that you make yourselves accessible, John and Nikki, as well.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Beth. I've attended your festival and it is brilliant, and I would recommend it to anyone. I had a problem about not being in the right room at the right time, but
Thank you for that endorsement. Yes, definitely come to the festival, because not only there's networking, but you will learn a lot about buyers and different topics around social procurement as well. In terms of what else you can do to get noticed, just something that we do as a business is, really think about our online presence and our branding and marketing to make sure that everything we're putting out there in terms of content is speaking to the buyers that we're trying to win work with. So we put a lot of content out there around kind of trying to bust myths around social enterprise procurement. So we just, for example, this week put a blog up about actually the ways that social enterprises can save you money, because often a lot of feedback we get from buyers is that social enterprises are too expensive. So putting out content and raising your profile to come across as a thought leader in your area of expertise really helps to prove your credibility. And if you can get speaking opportunities like this as well, it really helps for your clients to see actually they know what they're talking about. And again, that's just a way of like building trust as well. So if you're the kind of salesperson in your organization, it can be nerve-wracking, but make sure you get out there as much as possible and make people sick of your face.
So, memorable line there to take away, Beth. Thank you. Grant, you had another question you wanted to pose?
Just a quickie, I suppose it's for Nikki, really. And Nikki, wearing both of your sort of former Amy hat and ODS. I mean, Beth gave a really comprehensive approach there about how you can, develop yourself and become procurement ready. But, I touched on it before, and as you all know, when all these companies signed up to the Biosocial Corporate Challenge, they didn't meet their targets, as the government aren't, because it was difficult to find social enterprises that were ready and able to supply. I just wondered if you got sort of examples or even tips that complement what Beth has said about, why aren't more businesses doing more businesses with social enterprises, and how can those on the group make sure that they position themselves, if there's anything that didn't fit with what Beth had said, really.
No, I totally agree with what Beth said, to be fair. I know Social Enterprise UK were kind of they have got a database of social enterprises, but there are significant gaps in there, I feel, anyway. So I think that needs a bit more work from them. And I guess as organisations, we should be pushing them to do that, being sort of market leaders in a way. But I mean, it's always easy kind of locally, isn't it? I mean, what we're planning to do at ODS is have basically an open day where we can work with you, Grant, a new pool, and get local social enterprises to come in and just meet the procurement team, have a face-to-face, tell us about what you can offer us, and then we can share our pipeline with you and see if we can match up anything.
That sounds Sounds like a great,
Brilliant.
great idea. Thank you, Nikki. John, did you want to add anything there, or?
No, I won't add anything to that, but I did want to make another point about it. It's coming from what we're doing, I suppose, but it applies to a lot of things. Is the whole thing of Beth touched on it, being able to present what you do as social value and being really sort of succinct in the way you promote it. You know, as a buyer, it would be great to see something that is so clear that I know exactly what you do. I know what the impact is. I know the good that you do, and it's quantifiable. And a couple of other points is basically the whole reporting side as well will be important. It'll have growing importance, because as buyers, we'll know we're doing good by using social value suppliers, but we will want to report back on that to other people and let them know. So it's going to be something where we're looking for you to give us data on that. So we know that you do good. You've told us that. Where's the reporting? How does that come back to us? And finally, more data is that contract management piece as well. It's great winning a contract and you're working with a buyer, but that buyer will need to keep making sure and doing due diligence, making sure that's happening and everything's going on okay. So recording the data and putting it in management information, regularly send it back every quarter, that actually shows what's happening. It's really important and something that shouldn't be forgotten once you win the contract, I think, because we all want to see kind of like the upward trajectory and be able to report that back to everybody that what we've done has made an impact. But yeah, just wanted to make those points.
Thanks, John. Thank you.
I just got to chip in again very rudely, Paul, just to say something that's reminded me actually of almost the opposite of that, whilst all that is really important. And it's something I learned really from Richard on the call a long time ago. And I know that it's something Aspire is very feel strongly about. And at the end of the day, you've got to provide goods and services that are equally, if not as good, if not better than your competitors, but with the added benefit of all of that social value that John has mentioned. And okay, that's probably obvious, but sometimes I think some people feel that they should be getting some business because of sympathy of all the wonderful stuff that they're doing. But there we go.
Thanks, Grant. Yaz posed a helpful comment, a reflection in the chat around this iterative approach of, and I think also this closing this gap, which has been expressed in this call, that good. It's not a goodwill gap because there's lots of goodwill. It's the getting the various mechanisms from the buyer side and the ability range around the supplier side and getting them closer together. And that's obviously an ongoing journey, but clearly one that there's a lot of commitment to and some ambitious targets around what the next 18 months could hold. I think that moves quite nicely on to just to reminding people about the wider Escalate program while it's still operating by OSEP, and maybe Grant, perhaps Grant or Rosie, your best place just to flag what are the sort of other forms of support and other events that might be that colleagues on this call might be interested in registering for or finding out about.
Yeah, sure. Happy to cover that. So I will be sending a follow-up email after this with slides and some of the links that have been shared as well. But yeah, we've got a great program of events kind of over the next 6 months. The program finishes in April. We've got the Marketing with a Mission series, which continues until March next year. And we've also got the Introducing series, which are kind of like lunchtime bite-sized sessions online. The next one is on impact investment. So if you're keen to kind of explore getting funding through investment for your business, that's in December. And then in January, we've got one on money matters. So kind of really thinking about managing your finances to grow your business and kind of fund it if you're bootstrapping what you're doing. But I'll send the links to all of the events in the follow-up email as well, so you'll have them. But if you've got any questions about the programme, or if you want to set up a one-to-one with Grant, just send me an email. I'll put lots of info in my email.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And of course, then that all leads nicely to the end of February Meet the Buyer event that's been flagged previously. So very good. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Thanks, Catherine. Glad that that's been useful. I found it's been really pleasing to bring people together in this way, and appreciate in particular Nikki, John, and Beth, your time, your contributions. There's a lot of insight there that you've very kindly shared with us all. So thank you to you as speakers and presenters, and thank you to everybody as well for taking time out of busy days to come and listen and participate so well. Okay.
And thank you, Paul.
Always good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Great. It was nice
Thanks,
to see
everyone.
and I'm sure we'll see you all soon in person. It'd be great. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.